everybody, welcome back to the channel. As promised, this one's going to be about our vinyl liner in-ground pool installation. And the story starts a couple years ago when, we made the decision we were going to put something in, and that something was going to be an above ground pool. Called some local companies, looked into it, and it was going to cost us like $11,000 or $12,000 just to put a pool in before I even built a fence or anything else. And that comes with having to build a deck around it and stuff like that. Some concerns about where we were going to put it because our yard's kind of terraced in almost 3 levels. And when we added it all up, we made the decision that, hey, well, we can probably put in a in-ground pool ourselves. So I looked at some of the online companies you can get the packages from. It was going to cost us about the same $10,000 for just the equipment and the pool package itself, and then obviously everything else that goes with that. Excavation, concrete, plumbing, electrical, hardscaping, fence, you name it, it adds up pretty quickly. But what we ended up doing was putting together a plan, and then we started getting bids on contractors. We hadn't ordered the package yet, so we got some bids on contractors beginning of 2020 for excavation, and a couple of them came in pretty high, and then COVID hit, and they just stopped calling back at that point. And yeah, we thought the project was dead in the water until at the very least 2021. And then sometime around May, my wife did a cold call on some couple of the local pool builders, just seeing what that looked like, and we were assured, at least amongst ourselves, that it was going to be unattainable just because of price. So 2 of them came back, well, obviously higher than what we wanted to spend. But there was this one company that was about 45 minutes away from us that we weren't truly familiar with, a smaller company, that came in right about a price that we could afford. It was more than what I had planned on paying to do it myself, but we could afford it. And furthermore, they could at least get us in 2020. They were looking at the end of July, beginning of August to start, and we hoped that it would be done a few weeks later. So we signed the contract, we gave them 1/3 of the money, and the process started. And I wish I could say that it was easy. I wish I could say that it was completely carefree. It wasn't. It wasn't a disaster, and in the end we were happy with the product, but you sometimes have to temper your expectation with contractors. And so that's the story we're going to tell here today. I have some photos and some video that'll take us through the journey. So if you're thinking about putting an in-ground pool in, keep in mind it's a major construction project. We already knew that. But when you get tons of rain and some contractors that don't necessarily want to play by the rules, it's going to add up to frustration. And then when timelines expand and you're starting to lose swimming season, well, it is what it is. So this is the story. Stay tuned. So flash forward to, we'll say, the end of July 2020. And our pool had come in. They were ready to deliver the pieces, and they were going to start. Well, that's cool, but we were headed on vacation for a week, and I always wanted to be there when they started the process. However, I wasn't willing to lose my opportunity if I went on vacation and then they couldn't get to me again. The behind the scenes story of this is that this guy was juggling multiple pools at the same time. So you're going to see pretty quickly that our timeline got expanded just because they would come in and they would work for a few hours, maybe even 8 hours, but then they wouldn't be back for a week, just depending on what was going on. So what you can see in this picture here is the parts that they delivered. And then about 2 days later, I shipped out for a vacation in Sandbridge, Virginia. And luckily, we're kind of smart sometimes, not all the time. I put up a Google Nest camera on the back porch because that was always the plan anyway, just in case somebody comes in and tries to hop in the pool. We'll have them on video, but it also allowed me to monitor what was going on with the contractors while I wasn't there. And so they broke ground shortly before we actually returned from our vacation, so even later than they said they were going to. And let me tell you what, we found out a lot about the soil that our house was sitting on, which we should have known because we built this house, but nothing could prepare us for what they ripped out of the ground. So here we are, day one. This is a shot from the Google Nest Cam while I was on vacation. And right there, that should tell you what we were dealing with. And right there, it doesn't look too bad. So this is looking at the shallow end is where they started, and they were working on digging the deep end. However, when you look at it, you know, it's not the best quality. And I'll show you what we actually came home to. Now, mind you, for what they were working with, they did a pretty good job. The thing is everything in the area is shale. You take an inch and you end up with a foot is what ends up happening. So the result was that the hole was overdug for one, and they had to deal with a lot of shale removal and material removal, and so the hole just wasn't ideal. Positives of this, well, they didn't charge us any more because of the conditions that they were digging in. Negatives of it, well, that has a trickle-down effect. There was a lot of stuff that just was going to become harder now with what they were dealing with. And the biggest thing was setting the pool walls. They had to get pretty creative. Okay, so this is what we had when we got home. Which, hey, you know what? Again, major construction project. Not the end of the world. But here's the thing. It wasn't even done yet. So that was a day of digging. They literally started the day before we were coming home. You can see the Mini X sitting over there behind the one dirt mound. And the reason why it's sitting over there, and if you look close enough in some of these pictures, you'll see it's kind of dark towards the deep end. The soil is. It looks different. It's because they blew a hydraulic line on the Mini X. And guess what? They couldn't dig anymore. So they were dead in the water. This was a weekend. This was a Saturday, so they weren't coming back anyway. And we didn't see them again until sometime the next week. But we got a pretty good look at what we were dealing with. And keep in mind, so this pool is 16 feet by 32 feet, and it's 7 feet deep. So it's a non-diving pool, but it's deeper than a typical non-diving pool, which would probably be around 6 feet. So we had to get at least that far down, and they usually overdig 2 feet to each side, so 4 feet total in each direction. So if you got a 16 by 32, well, they're going to dig out a 20 by 36 hole plus the stairs. So it was a metric S-ton of dirt that had to come out of there. Again, we knew that, but they weren't too careful about how they piled it. And one of the things we're starting to realize is that backfill was probably going to be an issue, and also topsoil. There was none. We knew there was topsoil on the top because we were here when they graded the house when we built it. But there's only about 6 to 8 inches of topsoil all over, and it's all mixed in now. They didn't skim it first, so guess what I was going to end up buying? Again, in these pictures, you can see the pergola in the background. That was the COVID project initially, and then guess what? We just kept adding to it, and that's when the pool came in. So luckily, they didn't hit that with anything, and the patio was, for the most part, unscathed. Before they came in and started digging, I went ahead and took out all the pond stone and everything and piled it over on the other side out of the way, or at least so I thought. But one thing you can't be prepared for is the amount of damage done to your lawn, and then this spoil pile here on each side. Both of these piles ended up just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And especially considering the deep end was nowhere near complete, it got out of control pretty quickly. But again, I like to be in control of things, and one of the things that I ended up having to do was, again, control myself, knowing that this was just a process. But they were able to do this whole thing with that Mini X, no other equipment that they had to bring in. But this is pretty much how our yard looked, and worse, for over a month. So keep that in mind. All right, we'll flash forward a little bit. Obviously, they came back and they got the deep end finished. And they were able to get the pool wall set. Look closely at most of these pictures, you're going to see it's not done 100%. And if you look closer, you will also see there are major gaps underneath the bottom of the pool wall. So vinyl liner pool, if you're not familiar, 42 inch, pool wall that's supposed to sit on the ground, compacted earth. And then the rest of the pool is shaped off of whatever they dig out underneath, and then the liner sits in that once they put down the vermiculite or the poolcrete, depending on what they're going to put down on the bottom. You'll see that later. But what holds the pool walls back is actually a concrete curb that's a minimum of 8 to 10 inches thick all the way around, and it keeps the bottom of that pool from kicking out. And then they have struts that brace everything. So they hadn't actually shored everything up yet, but you're going to see pretty quickly that that concrete curb is going to become a problem. And ultimately, that's what ended up happening. So he undercut the concrete that we needed. And so when they brought in the truck after they trued everything up, not only did they have to put plywood on the inside of the deep end to keep it from pouring into the bottom of the deep end to form it, they also had to bring back another concrete truck to finish the job, because all this stuff's got to get inspected. So the next inspection point outside of where we're going to put the pool was the concrete curb. The inspector comes in, makes sure that the base of the pool is not going to go anywhere. And then they can start putting in everything else, like the plumbing and whatnot. Well, we had to wait until we could get a partial order of concrete that was going to be left over on a truck, because he didn't want to pay full price, which makes sense. And again, let me go ahead and give credit where credit is due. They did not charge me for more concrete. They just delayed the project longer. So unfortunately, that was just something we had to deal with. There was nothing we could do about it. So time is ticking away at this point. Yeah, and then I came home to this. So we had a lot of rain, obviously, because that's just what's going to have to happen. And I came home, and my wife knew about this. But this is the skid steer that they were using, which ended up in my neighbor's yard because they decided to take a shortcut. And the guy that was operating it assured me that, oh, no, we weren't over into your neighbor's yard. We saw the mow line. Well, no, you can see the mow line. He was 2.5, 3 feet. So I had to pay for that. I had to replant all the grass seed, even though they said they would, but they never took care of that. So that one was on me, and I had to explain it to the neighbor, who luckily was really cool about it. Finally, we get into some progress. Now, this is all me. I did all the electric myself. So what you're looking at are all the conduit runs for the low voltage lighting. You're looking at the convenience outlet I ran out to, the post for the pergola that had to be within 6 feet, but not more than 20 feet of the pool's edge. And I spent a morning bending all this conduit and making the connections to where the fittings for the pool were going to for the light fixtures. And that's pretty much where we were at. They actually hadn't run any of the plumbing other than just placing the skimmers and the return fittings in to the actual pool walls. But up to that point, nothing else had been done. That will come later. They were actually nice enough to let me get in there ahead of them rather than having to work around what they put in. But one of the things that really killed me is that every time I would dig out, so this is the trench running back to the house was what they dug, but I had dug a significant amount up to the house because theirs was only going to go so far to the pool pad. I had to dig up everything so that I could run my conduit all the way over to the wall of the house where the sub panel was. And every time I would dig something out, they would fill it back in so they could get wheelbarrows over. So this was a give and take relationship, to say the least. Another day, more progress. So a couple days later, they came back and they ran all their plumbing back to the pool plumbing pad. You look in these videos, you'll see they used Spaflex or flexible PVC. Initially, I wasn't 100% happy with that because I wanted hard plumbing throughout the entire build. But when you start to look at it, you see it actually makes more sense for them to use it based on the ground conditions, and especially with backfill. They start backfilling with some of this dirt, which that was their plan. You're going to start breaking pipes. So as the ground flexes, the Spaflex is better for that. It glues up the same way as regular PVC. And as I mentioned in my other video reviewing the pool pad equipment upgrade I just recently did, they used home runs for everything. So every skimmer and every return has its own run rather than having branch lines all around the pool that honestly you're going to restrict your flow and make it a lot harder for you to troubleshoot and in the future and isolate things. Here's a really good view of the quote-unquote forming they had to do to keep that concrete from pouring into the bottom of the pool when they were pouring the concrete curb. And in most of these pictures, you can actually see the concrete curb poking out there. It isn't the neatest job, but given what they were working with, they were using wheelbarrows to bring every bit of this concrete back because they couldn't get the truck in place, especially up against the patio area and the pergola. But this stuff just lays on the ground, and then when they backfill it, there it stays. And so far we haven't had any issues with it. The only thing that I have read about this stuff is that because of what it's made out of, you might end up with rodents or bugs and stuff that want to eat it. But it hasn't been an issue. Some of the stuff is hard plumbed in, as you can see. And then obviously that anything that's gray is all 1-inch PVC non-metallic conduit for all of the runs of low voltage for the lighting. So it's really not overly complicated. It's a pretty simple small pool for the most part, 20,000 gallons, and really not too much to it when they put it all together. So pretty happy. All right, here's the old pool pad and the equipment, which watch my other video and you're going to find out this lasted about 3 weeks of actual use and about 4 months of sitting, and it's all gone now with the exception of that filter. But what you don't see is a pit, a trench. That's right, we hit backfill. So if you look at this, everything is backfilled, and what we're waiting on here is concrete, which is where one of the other nightmares begins. We'll get to that in a minute, but you can see all the pad supports, which are those metal supports coming off of the pool. That's actually there to support the concrete pad in case the ground settles. And you can see some of the hardware around the pool. So the pool rails and the pool ladder. Everything's got to be bonded together with a number 8 copper wire. The pool pump, all the equipment, the steel pool walls, all the metal handrails, and then if anything that is metal within 5 feet of that, including the fence, which it's called equipotential bonding, and it's one of the things that's got to get inspected. That way everything's at the same electrical potential and you can't get shocked by the difference in the stray electricity that might be inherent in some of these metal components. And the water gets bonded. This is important, and it makes a difference about how the concrete gets poured. This is a little bit of foreshadowing. I actually don't have any pictures of them actually pouring the concrete. Guys came in the night before, they dumped some rock down, graded the area a little bit, and then the concrete contractor came back the next day. We had set the inspection up for that day, and the inspector had to come out, look at the rebar, make sure that it was bonded into that equipotential bonding system, and then, and only then, could they actually pour concrete. Well, guess what? Concrete contractor got a bug up his ass and decided he didn't want to wait, so they took pictures of it, even though we had verified the guy was coming in like 45 minutes. They had concrete waiting, he didn't want to wait. They went ahead and poured. They left one corner open and then showed the inspector all the pictures, and he was not happy. I've met this guy before. He's a good guy. Dealt with him when I built my pergola. Local inspector, does all the inspections, and they pissed him off. So what ended up happening? He failed them on the bonding inspection. What did that mean? That meant that the builder ended up having to pay $500 for them to come back out and do a test after everything was already built to make sure that all the bonding was in place. And basically, it was just making an example out of him, because come to find out, this concrete contractor had done this before. So it delayed the project further. It put us in jeopardy of not actually getting their final inspection. And it also put them in jeopardy of, hey, if this wasn't done right, they're going to have to rip all that concrete out. But that didn't come until after the entire pool was done. The inspector knew that, and the concrete contractor didn't care. The pool contractor, however, did care. He was not happy, but guess what? I made sure that they knew that it was not my problem. Okay, this is where it gets exciting. This was liner installation day, so pretty cool thing. They actually had a 2-part hopper truck that shot the Portland cement and sand mix into the bottom and mixed it on site with water. They had to refill this thing one other time because it took so much to compensate for the fact that the bottom of that pool had been ripped to shreds during the excavation process. So the bottom of the pool is actually over a foot thick of this stuff. But I will tell you this, these guys work like dogs, and they did one hell of a job putting in this liner. You can see the foam on the pool walls, but what's lacking in all of this is the huge blowout I had with the contractor about getting to this point, because to get that truck, if they weren't able to get this done on the day that they needed to get it done on, I'd have to wait like another 3 weeks. So they were rushing to get this done. Hence the reason why the concrete was pushed so quickly. Hence the reason why everything just came to a head from the friction that happened between us and the pool builder. I put a proverbial boot in his you-know-what, and ultimately ended up getting what I wanted. I just didn't want it to go that way because I think he, in the end, was a good guy. He was just in over his head with multiple jobs, and I don't think he was that good of a businessman, honestly. He's not used to people challenging him, and hey, you know what? It is what it is. I don't think he's a bad person, but I will tell you, they did a hell of a job putting this liner in. So once they got it all vacuumed in, that's when the water truck showed up. And 2 6,000-gallon loads of water. Actually, I think he was overloaded that day, so the guy said he was actually closer to 7,500. So water was included in the package, and we got our first couple fill-ups. The rest I actually had to put in with a garden hose. And this is the water. Like I said, quite a bit of it, in fact. And this is the last time I actually saw these guys. So, end result, all the people that work for this pool contractor were professional. They did great work. The pool contractor himself, I don't know if I could actually say that I would recommend the company. I don't think he's the best businessman, as I said before, but the customer service is lacking. I think he meant well. I just think he had probably too many projects going on and he thought he could get away with it. We ended up paying about $33 and some change for this pool installation, not including electric, which is what I did myself. So we saved a significant amount, probably $2,000, maybe $2,500, not having an electrician come out. And in my area, I can do that electrical work myself. I've got a background in it. I'm not licensed, but as long as it's inspected, I can do it. And everything's done to the NEC guidelines. But yeah, I just don't know if I would ever recommend this particular contractor to anybody, but the end result is I'm happy with the product. And the reason why we never saw him again is because I ended up doing a lot of the ancillary items myself after the fact because I didn't feel like dealing with them. I had 14 cubic yards of topsoil brought in. I went ahead, my uncle owns a construction company, and I grabbed one of his Bobcats, brought it up to the house, and spent a week moving dirt, digging post holes, because the only way to do that was definitely with a Bobcat. I have learned from my mistakes in the soil in southern Pennsylvania, and anything but heavy equipment is basically taking a knife to a gunfight. So I spent some time doing that. I ended up spending about $2,500 on the fence materials, and I installed the fence myself, as I said, so I saved a significant amount of money there. We did not put a fence all the way around the property. My property is, again, 3/4 of an acre. It's about 35,000 square feet, and it would be a lot to fence. So we just fenced around the lower part of the backyard, off of the house, and around the pool. And that's pretty much all we need. Keeps it nice and controlled. There's a very little likelihood that anybody's going to come wandering in there because of the gates. They lock. I've got the camera out there now. So I ended up doing the lion's share of the remainder of the work. Pool builder did include a really nice pool cover, which I told him I wasn't going to pay for because that was never in the contract. They wanted $2,500 for a pool cover. They don't cost that much. So I was going to buy that myself. But guess what? He ordered it anyway because that's kind of how scatterbrained he was. And by the time he realized it, which was when I told him that he had ordered it and delivered it to my house and that I wasn't going to pay for it, he just said, keep it. Well, guess what? It didn't fit. When I put it out of the box to install it, it was not the right one. So I ended up going out and buying my own anyway, installing it myself, winterizing the pool after 3 weeks of use, and giving him back that pool cover when I was giving him his last payment. And that's the last time I ever spoke with him. Don't expect I'll ever hear from him again. And don't expect that he is going to be doing any work in my area, because I think that was one of the other problems. It was a lot farther away than the area that he typically works in, which is closer to his shop, about 45 minutes to an hour. I mean, just the guy that came in and had to remove our dirt, which was probably 20 dump truck loads, it took him 2 days, 8 hours a day, and he had to drive an hour each time he came out there. So I don't think he's going to be doing any work in the Hanover area of Pennsylvania. He's from Red Lion, Delta, which is, again, about 45 minutes to an hour away. But this is what we've got. It was a great start. Obviously, we've already replaced all the pool pad plumbing and most of the equipment. Why? Because, yeah, we upgraded. And I could have had him do that or another pool company, but it would have cost me a lot more. Instead, I only got about $4,500 in parts and equipment out of pocket, including that new heater. So check out that video if you're interested in what that looks like. Otherwise, if you have any questions, please let me know. I am not an expert on these things, but I think you're probably starting to realize I really love doing things myself because it saves me money. I will answer any questions I can. If I can't, maybe I can point you in the right direction. But this was our process. I hope it helps you out if you're in the market. And as always, stay classy.